Hello, everybody. My name is Lee Schwartz, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar titled Accuracy and Automation. Spend more time focused on your business and less time on your financial reporting processes. So before we get started here, I'd like to just take a moment and say a few words about SVA. So for those of you not familiar with us, we were founded 47 years ago, which means we are just about halfway to our goal of being a 100-year firm. Our vision is to remain independent. So while a lot of other regional firms look to consolidate or merge with larger firms, our goal is to continue serving the same clientele we have since 1974, and that's nonprofits and closely held businesses. So with that in mind, we've really strived to provide more information and assistance over the last 10 months than anyone else. We've conducted 33 webinars and have had over 5,000 attendees. When the first PPP loan program was launched, we provided guidance not just to our clients, but to anyone with questions, because the stronger your businesses are, the stronger SVA is. And we've got a bunch more events coming up, so I'll tell you about those at the end. We are going to leave a few minutes at the end for Q&A here. If you have a question, please open up the chat box in Zoom and submit it there. If you're a client and you have questions coming out of this, please reach out to your SVA contact. If you are not a client and have questions, please reach out to me and I can get you connected to a subject matter expert who can get those questions answered. You know, over the last, whatever it's been, 10 months or so, we have just found that there are a ton of businesses that aren't getting timely or knowledgeable advice from their CPA or advisors. And we are happy to step in and help. So please share this information or our contact details with others. All right, let me introduce our speakers real quick. If you've attended any of those PPP webinars I mentioned, you're already familiar with Nancy Melberg. But for you first timers, Nancy is a principal with SVA and leads our Management Advisory Services group that helps clients improve processes and increase profitability. Adam Hansen is a senior manager and CPA that advises clients on accounting and tax issues, helps with accounting software implementation, and assists with customizing and understanding your financial statements. So sorry for the long intro. I will be back towards the end, but Nancy, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So we have some good information to cover today, and I think as everyone will see, I think this information is really relative to a lot of things that are going on right now, because I think with COVID and with businesses possibly slowing down a little bit, I think people have done what they can to possibly consolidate some of the roles within their organization, or possibly they're dealing with a smaller staff in their accounting department. So we're hoping that we can provide people with some opportunities here and some items that they could maybe take back to their business. I know a lot of this information is also very specific to your individual business. And so as Lee said, if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to us. So with that, let's get started. So I think some of the benefits to automation, as I mentioned before, is that we're going to be able to save time, which time is important right now for some people because they have less staff. So saving time is also going to be able to create more efficiencies, and it also helps reduce errors. So anytime we have people doing things manually, it's going to create, there's always room for error. So we want to ensure greater consistency. We want to really be able to provide financial data much quicker than ever before. And this, I know that people have always said we need our financial statements sooner. And so we're hoping that there's some efficiencies that can help people get those financial statements sooner so they can make business decisions and react a little bit quicker if there are problems. It also reduces a chance of fraud or internal controls, and it creates opportunities. And what I mean by creating opportunities is really the ability to take on new service lines, new ventures within your organization. There are a lot of times as I'm working with businesses, and I've worked with a lot of different types of businesses, where they might want to start a new service line or start something, but if they don't have efficiencies and controls within their organization, it's very, very difficult to take on something new. You really have to make sure that you have your arms around what you're doing currently before you can take on something else. And we're going to go into a lot more detail in the next few slides and really dig into some of these items a little bit more. So with that, let's get started. Turn it over to you, Adam.
Yeah, so a great way to start out, going back to getting your arms wrapped around what you're currently doing, is to assess your own processes and procedures. And where this can start is meeting with your team members and really sitting down with your employees and going through what their process is to get their job done, and documenting that process. You know, the items you would want to discuss or want to cover is, number one, what are their likes and dislikes of what they're currently doing? What softwares are they utilizing? What do they have access to? And what type of access do they have? Even items like how many monitors are they using? Where are they printing documents to? All of this information can help, again, determine opportunities for possible efficiencies. Another item would be to determine the software programs that are currently being used, and how do they interact with each other. You know, your accounting system, your POS system, inventory system. Are you calculating information outside of the software, let's say in Excel, to do certain calculations that maybe aren't set up in your accounting system? This type of assessment helps to determine if we can leverage those softwares even more. And, you know, this type of service, you certainly want to get done on a somewhat regular basis, especially if you can have an outside person come in and review this for you. SVA certainly offers that service, but even if it's not us, if it's somebody else, we certainly recommend that you have this done, have an outside set of eyes come in and review the different processes and procedures you have in place.
And one of the things that I want to point out here is that when going through this process, it's not necessarily 100% accounting functions where you're going to see some efficiencies, but it could be something as simple as a situation where somebody is printing a document, but they have to walk to the opposite side of the building to pick it up from a specific printer. And believe it or not, I've seen that quite often. Or somebody has to scan information because they're scanning stuff internally in their system, but there's only one scanner that the entire office is using, and the scanner is somewhere else and someone's using it. So these are the types of efficiencies that sometimes seem really immaterial, but I can tell you, when you start to take all these little things and you start to add them together, they can really help save some efficiencies within your organization. One other thing Adam had mentioned that I think is really important is people in an accounting role having dual monitors. And I had worked with a client, this is a real life example, that as I was working with her, she would be looking at one screen and then writing a number down on a piece of paper so she could go to another software and look up that number. And my comment to them was, why do you not have two monitors? And for $80, they went and purchased another monitor. And now we can see two different pieces of information at the same time to be cross-referencing things, instead of having to write that number down and go back and pull out that other sheet. So little, very simple things like this can really help generate efficiencies within your organization. So also evaluating the pain points. This is a place that I always like to start when I meet with a new client, is to figure out what is the problem, or where do you need some assistance within your organization. One of the common themes for people is that we're doing a lot of stuff outside of our accounting system. And that's always a red flag for me, because there are ways that you can consolidate that into your system. And this is also a really good indicator that you could possibly not have the right accounting system in place. So you really want to evaluate, what are you doing outside of the system? Why are you doing it outside of the system? And is it possible that your system is capable of doing it, but you just don't know how to do it? And so those are the type of things that really digging in, or getting maybe somebody, an outside consultant or something in, can really help you determine what the pain point is and how to fix it. The other issue could be the length of time, as I indicated before. the length of time that it's taking to generate your financial statements. What is actually taking so long for someone to generate that statement? Is it because you're keying in a lot of data? There's a lot of data entry involved. Sometimes it could be you just don't have enough support within your accounting department. And sometimes no matter how many efficiencies you put in place, it might be just that you need additional accounting staff. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to get those statements provided any sooner. So I think those are things that you really need to look at and drill down and then determine, if I do bring another person on, what will that person do? What responsibilities am I splitting? And how much time will it save in preparing these financial statements?
Yeah, and the one thing I just wanted to add there, going back to the software, certain softwares are great for businesses when they're at a certain level, and then sometimes you just have to make that move to a more advanced software. It's hard to force softwares to report on data if they're just not built to do so. And so sometimes it just makes the most sense to, as you're assessing your accounting softwares, to also determine maybe you've outgrown the software that you're in, and maybe you need to go to a more robust one to provide the data that you're looking for.
Adam, that's a great point. And I'm going to say something, hopefully I don't offend anyone. I do like QuickBooks. I think QuickBooks is a great program, and we have a lot of clients on QuickBooks. But as people tend to get a little bit more sophisticated in the type of reporting that they want, sometimes they're forced to look outside of a system like QuickBooks to be able to provide them the information. So again, I'm not saying anything negative whatsoever about QuickBooks, but that is something that's a little bit more of an entry-level software, and maybe it's possible that people have outgrown that system and they need to look at something a little bit more robust to give them the information. The other thing that I want to talk about is just making sure that you have the right employees in the right seat. I don't know if anyone has ever read, I believe it's in the book Good to Great, having the right people in the right seat, or the right people on the right bus, is that some employees have organization strengths, some have financial strengths, and you really want to make sure that you're utilizing your staff in the right capacity. And it might possibly mean moving things around or shifting responsibilities within your organization. And I think that's important that people make sure that they do that, because that will help increase efficiencies as well. And then the other thing is always, are you receiving the necessary and accurate data? And this kind of goes a little bit back to the financial statements, is really understand, what do you need in your company to help you make better decisions or to get things done faster? I think this is something that every business owner should have written down somewhere. I always call it my wish list of what is the perfect information that I have and the perfect data I would get it to help me make decisions. And then you want to work backwards and figure out how can you make that happen. And these are just some of the pain points we see there. Again, for every business, you're going to have your own pain point, and it's important that you document what those are so you can help determine, how do I fix these?
Yeah, so ways to automate and improve, one place to start would be reviewing your chart of accounts and your trial balance. Are there old accounts that you no longer use that you could maybe delete or inactivate in the chart of accounts? How long is your trial balance? Detail is great, but too much can be a little overwhelming. So you want the trial balance to be streamlined with accounts and data that is going to truly help you run and make better business decisions. In addition, setting up the accounts so that, are they cost of goods sold accounts? Are they direct expenses, or should they truly be overhead? We want to make sure that we're calculating our gross profit in a correct manner, so we can be comparing our figures to the industry standards, as well as, are we departmentalizing the financial statements in ways such as by location, by department, so on and so forth.
So one of the things I want to point out here that is something really important for people to think about is, as you're going through these processes, you really want to think about where you are in the future, or what your plans are in the future, and not just what your needs are for today. And I want to give you an example, is that if you are a type of company that's doing has multiple service lines. For example, let's say you sell a piece of equipment, but you also service equipment. It's really important that you're segregating your service department from your sales department that sells the equipment. And the reason for this could be that at some point in the future, your company may choose to sell part of that service line. You may choose to sell your service department, but not sell the part of the company that actually sells equipment. And another thing to think about is there are certain industries that could possibly deem a higher multiple if they do sell, versus a company that's just selling equipment might have a lower multiple versus a service company. So you want to make sure that you have that information segregated and accurate, so you make sure that you get the highest value for that piece of your company. And another reality is, if your company is not doing so great right now and you need to figure out where the problems are within your organization, you could have a segment or a business line that's dragging the rest of the company down and you don't even know what it is. So it's extremely important to understand which part of your business is successful and which one do you need to focus on, and understand, if I do sell, where's the value in the company. One of the other things we can do is we can create reoccurring and memorized transactions for monthly entries. It's amazing how simple this is to set up in an organization, but how few people that I see actually use this. Something like rent expense, it's the same amount every month. You can set up recurring bills in your system so they automatically post. If you're doing something like accrued payroll, you can set up entries that automatically reverse the first of the next month. There are so many different opportunities here that people can do to create any processes within their organization that are repeat processes, even if they're not the same dollar amounts. Sometimes you can still get the entry in there and very quickly edit the dollar amount. But for those that have the same amounts, very important to set those up so they're automatic, and it saves time. And not only does it save time, but going back to that accuracy, nothing gets missed because it's already in the system, so you're not going to miss paying something.
Yeah, in addition, I mean, this seems again kind of a simple item, but utilizing the default ledger accounts for vendors and customers. Again, one less step when you're entering the transaction of the system that you have to worry about if you have a default account set up for each of those vendors as well as the customer, so that they're being applied to the same expense or to the same revenue each time. Again, it just improves accuracy, consistency, and one less data entry step that would have to be taken.
And most softwares on this note are very forgiving if you want to change something. These are just defaults. In other words, it's just something that's going to come up, but you can change it at any level within your system. So keep in mind, anywhere where you have default accounts set up, probably 95% or more of softwares will let you change that default. One of the other things that I think it's really important for business owners to utilize is dashboards. And again, this is an area where I just don't see people taking advantage of. Many accounting softwares out there today offer dashboards. And if your system doesn't offer a dashboard, there are actually programs that you can purchase that you can integrate with your system that is just for a dashboard. So it's important to know, what are the things that I'm looking at every day. I can tell you most business owners want to know, what's my cash balance, who do I owe, and who owes me. And then maybe an income statement. Some systems let you add income statements. But if you can utilize a dashboard and get that information visible very quickly to a business owner, then they're not going to be going to the bookkeeper, the accountant on staff 2-3 times a day and say, hey, what did we collect today? Where are we at with our payables? Who do I owe? They can just go to their dashboard and they can see this information. And having those dashboards, making them visible to the business owner, doesn't necessarily mean that they need to have full access to the system. They can really just have access to this dashboard. So I think every company should have a dashboard that provides useful information to business owners or anyone within the organization that needs information on a daily basis.
Yeah, Nancy, that's a good point regarding the users, because many softwares have different level of users and you're paying depending on the user level. And so if you can have an owner be just maybe a viewer or something rather than full access, they may not need full access. And so by having a dashboard available, he can see the information or she can see the information they're looking for, but also save costs on possibly the user access to the system.
Good point.
Another item is avoid multiple touches of the same process. You know, every time someone touches something, it costs money because it's additional time. So anywhere where you can reduce the touches on a process really is best. Now, segregation of duties is always important, but we don't want to over segregate those duties. And so we want to have it always make sense and flow. For instance, if a employee needs to access a certain portion of the inventory software to generate a report, but they have to rely on someone else to generate that report for them, you know, is there a way that we could grant that employee access to the inventory software, maybe on a limited basis, so that they can get out of the software what they're looking for, so that they can continue to move on with whatever task they're working on and not rely on another, you know, on a coworker to finish that task for them.
And you always want to use features within your accounting software that avoid any outside calculations. Because of them, this goes back to the accuracy point, but also the efficiency. So some of the things that I see happen quite a bit, and keep in mind that not every software has some of this functionality that I'm speaking of, but there are a lot of software programs out there today where you can do automatic allocations. For example, if you're taking something and you're splitting it between multiple departments, because again, we talked about the importance of departments, but now let's say that you have an advertising bill and you have to split that advertising bill among 3 or 5 departments. That can be cumbersome for somebody entering the data in. So if you can use an auto allocation, you can set up an allocation that says split this equally among every department, or I want this department to get 10%, this one to get 20%. You can define what those allocations are. And then every time something is posted, for example, to advertising, all you'd have to do is press a button for this allocation and the system will automatically allocate it. So again, you want to see if these features or this functionality is available within the software you're using and make sure that you're taking advantage of it. You know, it's funny how I'm sure all of you have heard this many times, and I know I say it often, that when it comes to a specific software, you hear people say, I'm probably only using 10% of the capabilities that the software has. And I know that I do that with some softwares. And so this is a really good time to figure out what is that other 90% that the program can do, and let it help you.
Yeah, so another way to automate and improve the process is synchronizing your bank and credit card accounts. You know, this is a great tool. It can certainly save time on data entry, but I also want to make sure that we're all cautious with this. I've seen quite a few times where clients are importing information into their accounting system directly from the bank or the credit card company, and it's just not being allocated to the correct accounts. So you always want to make sure that you are consistently reviewing the information that's being brought into your accounting software, and as well as spending a lot of time on the front end, making sure you're allocating those costs appropriately. So this is a great tool, but certainly be careful as you use it and make sure you're reviewing what's being brought into your system.
Importing large files, very similar to what Adam just touched on, I think. If you do have a large file that you're bringing into your system, maybe something like credit card, see if you can upload that data into your system versus having someone having to manually key it. So you always want to utilize import features when they're available. Even if you have to get the information in an Excel file and then import it in, sometimes that still takes people less time because they can key things or they can cut and paste in Excel versus actually in the accounting software.
Another item to consider: automate your payroll entry. So this really goes to those companies who are outsourcing their payroll to a company like Paychex, ADP. You know, those types of companies do offer imports to your GL file of the payroll entry for each payroll processed. So it's certainly something to explore rather than having to do journal entries to record the payroll expenses.
So another thing you can do is you can add alerts. Many programs offer the ability to create alerts within your system to notify you that something needs to be done. Very similar to how we get alerts in Outlook. If you have a meeting 15 minutes before the meeting, it's alerting you. You can actually have your accounting software alert you of certain things, so things aren't getting missed and people aren't having to rely on outside schedules for information.
Another item that would be, you know, that we're trying to utilize our software more, leverage our software more, and not using software outside the system is to try and use special tracking fields within the software to track sales by state, sales by salesperson, those types of items. You know, if you assess your accounting software and are able to track that information within the software, then you're not necessarily having to do it somewhere else.
And you can also utilize notes within your system, kind of use it as a mini CRM. If you have other people pulling the same data and you want to make notes in the system, a lot of systems have notes for customers and vendors. You want to make sure that maybe you're utilizing that feature. Just again, saves a little bit of time.
Yeah, this next one, creating groups to essentially for your vendors, really that could come into play if, you know, when you want to summarize in total what you're spending for each vendor, because you may then be able to communicate with some of your suppliers and ask to be on a rebate program and possibly save some funds that way.
So I know we're getting a little bit short on time here. Time goes by fast, I guess. So one of the last points we want to make on here is to consider using cloud-based accounting software. Sometimes that gives people the ability to access the software possibly when they're not on premises or when they have a few extra minutes and they're somewhere else, they can get in and get things updated. And it also gives visibility to others within the organization that you want to give right to access that software. So I think now we just want to touch very quickly on maybe some things to avoid as you're thinking about going through this process. And then we'll see if we have any questions.
Yeah, so again, complete dependency on automation. You always want to be reviewing the data that's coming in. You don't want to rely on technology computers to be thinking for themselves. They're going to do what they're programmed to do. But you certainly want to be reviewing the information to make sure that however things are being allocated or how it's being brought into your system still makes sense.
You know, I tell people all the time, and I have to stop telling them this, but I say computers can't think. But I think computers probably can't think. They might be able to think a little bit better than me sometimes. But what computers can't do is they can't reason. And so it's important that if there is anything that's odd, that's not in the normal processes, that somebody's looking at that, because a computer can't reason with the data to determine what needs to happen with it. You also want to make sure that you never get complacent with evaluating any of your systems or processes. You should be doing this periodically throughout your organization, and really not just with your accounting processes, but with all of your processes, just to make sure that you're staying relevant with any current technology that's available to you.
And to piggyback off that, don't fear change. I think it's hard not to fear change, but you know, don't let that hinder you from assessing your processes and considering ways to or opportunities that you can possibly improve the accounting department.
Okay, Adam and Nancy, you're right. A lot of we thought a half an hour would be enough time. Maybe we were we didn't realize there was quite as much to go through as there was. So knowing that we need to wrap up here, I know we had said we were going to take some questions, and we did have a few come in. So we'll get to one or two of them real quick. For those of you who do still have questions and haven't submitted them yet, again, if you're a client, reach out to your SVA contact. If you're not, reach out to me. We will get those questions answered. But just real quick, guys, one that came in, I think, Adam, when you were touching on payroll is, do you recommend doing payroll internally or outsourcing it?
Yeah, it depends, first of all, on the accounting staff internally. It's very cost effective and efficient to use a outsourced payroll service such as Paychex or ADP. They're staying up to date on all the rules. They're making all the payments on your behalf. It really is a nice service, and it takes a lot of the time and effort that has to be put forth on that payroll process. It really takes it off your plate.
I think now, especially when you look at things like the employee retention credit, the PPP loans going out there, if you have or are using a third-party software for that or a third-party vendor, they really can assist you, and they are up to date on all of that relevant information. And there's a lot of information out there to know regarding some of these items.
All right, and then last question real quick that we'll take is we were considering switching off of QuickBooks at the beginning of the year, but didn't make it. But now we don't want to wait until next January. How difficult is it to switch accounting software in the middle of the year?
I would say not at all anymore. All these accounting softwares offer you the ability to put in beginning balances. You will lose your historical detail for those 6 months. So I always recommend that you have that system available, print out PDFs, but you will still have all of the accurate information going forward with beginning balances, even if you are using payroll. And it's funny because I've been doing this for 20 some years, and I know in the beginning people would always run dual systems when they switched. I do not recommend that anymore. You can literally, on the date you go live on your new software, flip a switch. There is no need anymore to be running dual systems. So it is very simple to do it in a time. I always recommend the end of a quarter, or at a minimum the end of a month. You never want to do it mid-month. That would be my only comment on that. The end of a month, 1/1 of the next month, or the end of a quarter.
Okay. All right, well, we're already a couple minutes over. Nancy and Adam, again, thank you for such great content. To those of you who did submit questions and we didn't get to them, I'm very sorry. We can reach out to you with those specific answers. So as we wrap up, I just want to let you know you can go to svaaccountants.com/events, where the recording of this webinar will be located, as well as additional information on upcoming events. So our next webinar as a part of this series is going to be on January 27th, and that'll be about streamlining your accounting software. But we've got our next actual webinar coming up on the most recent stimulus and the second round of PPP loans coming up on Tuesday, or as Nancy calls it, her PPP book club.
Book club.
Yeah. And then after that, we'll have some industry-specific roundtables coming over the next few weeks. So we are limiting attendance to those. They're very interactive in nature. And I know some of them are already filling up. So if you would like to attend, I'd suggest getting on there today or early next week. And I just lastly want to remind you all that the SVA team is only a phone call or an email or a Zoom meeting away. So if you're a client, reach out to your SVA contact. And if you're not currently an SVA client, please reach out to me so I can get you the help or the answers that you need. Thank you again for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you at some or all of our upcoming webinars.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.